If you spent 5 whole years working in a cold, dark country thousands of miles away, breaking your back in bitter freezing weather just to build a dream home for your wife, only to come back and find her spending all your hard-earned money on her lover, what would you do? Would you break down and scream in front of them? Or would you stay calm, step back into the dark, and plan a revenge so cold that both your families would watch her entire world crumble to pieces? The moment I unlocked my own front door on a rainy Tuesday night, clutching a gold anniversary ring in my pocket, I thought I was walking into the arms of the woman I loved. I had flown 4,000 miles back home 2 weeks early to surprise Sarah for our 5th wedding anniversary. Instead of a warm welcome, the hallway smelled like cigar smoke and expensive cologne that definitely did not belong to me. Walking down the dark corridor toward our bedroom, I saw designer clothes, high-end watches, and luxury gear scattered all over our furniture. When I looked through the half-open bedroom door, my blood froze solid. A stranger was sleeping soundly on my side of the bed, wrapped under the blanket I had paid for, while my framed wedding picture on the nightstand was flipped face down. In the bathroom right across the room, I could hear Sarah happily humming a song under the shower. Standing there with my heavy suitcases, watching her lover sleep in my bed, the realization hit me like a sledgehammer. My wife had turned my life into a sick joke. But I did not scream, I did not throw my bags, and I certainly did not give them a chance to play the victim. I backed away without making a single sound, stepped out into the freezing rain, and swore to myself that I would make her pay for every single drop of sweat I had wasted on her. To understand why this betrayal tore my soul into pieces, you have to know what I went through to earn that money. 5 years ago, when Sarah and I got married, we were drowning in debt and living in a tiny rental apartment where the heater barely worked. When an industrial firm offered me a high-paying contract in the frozen oil fields of northern Canada, it felt like our only escape from poverty. It was supposed to be a temporary sacrifice so we could buy a proper 4-bedroom home and start a family. Sarah cried at the airport gate, wrapping her arms around my neck and swearing on her life that she would count every single day until I returned. For the first 3 years, I lived like a prisoner in a windowless concrete room, working 16-hour double shifts in 30 below temperatures. I ate cheap instant noodles, wore torn boots with holes in the soles, and sent over 80% of my hard-earned paycheck straight into our joint savings account. Every night, no matter how broken my body felt from hauling heavy steel pipes, I called Sarah on video, listened to her voice, and looked at real estate listings together. Every drop of my blood, sweat, and tears felt worth it because I believed I was protecting the woman who loved me. But while I was destroying my health under Arctic winds, her old high school ex, Ryan, a smooth-talking scammer who had never held a real job in his life, moved back into town. Sarah quietly opened the door to my house and handed him the keys to my entire life. The subtle signs of betrayal had been there all along, but my blind trust made me ignore every red flag. During my 4th year overseas, her calls became short and rushed, usually happening only when she needed extra cash for sudden emergencies. First, it was $5,000 for a fake roof repair, then $7,000 for her car engine, and then $8,000 to help her cousin with college fees. Every single time she asked, my heart melted, and I signed up for brutal overtime shifts in freezing ice storms, destroying my knees and back just so she would never face financial stress. There was no broken roof, no damaged engine, and no cousin in college. Sarah was using my sweat and blood to pay for Ryan's designer clothes, fine dining, and luxury resort vacations. As I sat in my rental car outside our house in the pouring rain, watching the bedroom light turn off, my grief transformed into a razor-sharp, freezing anger. I realized that confronting her right then would only let her cry, make up lies, and try to hide the rest of the money before I could legally protect myself. If she thought I was just an idiot working thousands of miles away, I was going to let her keep believing it until the net closed in around her. I pulled out my phone, dialed my lawyer, and began preparing a trap that would expose her fake marriage, her greed, and her secret lover in front of both our families at the exact same time. Sitting in my car outside the house with the engine idling, listening to the rain beat heavy against the windshield, I forced myself to stop shaking. I knew that if I let anger take over, I would mess everything up and give Sarah a chance to twist the narrative or move whatever was left in our accounts. My first phone call wasn't to her, but to a lawyer recommended by one of my coworkers back home. His name was Arthur, a sharp, older attorney who listened to my situation in complete silence for 10 whole minutes. When I finished explaining what I had seen in my bedroom, Arthur didn't offer empty pity. He told me straight up that I needed undeniable paper evidence before throwing a single accusation. He advised me to book a cheap hotel room for the night, keep my return a secret from everyone, and meet him at his office at 8 o'clock the next morning with every financial document I could access. I checked into a small motel on the edge of town, staying awake until sunrise, staring at the ceiling as every single lie from the past 2 years flashed through my mind. At 8 sharp, I walked into Arthur's office, bringing along laptop backups of our bank statements, wire transfers, and credit card histories. Arthur pulled up the records on his screen, and within 20 minutes, his calm expression turned into a grim frown. He pointed out 9 major wire transfers over the last 14 months totaling over $54,000, all routed directly to a personal account under Ryan's name. But it didn't stop there. Sarah had also taken out a second mortgage on our house without my knowledge by forging my electronic signature on digital closing documents, using the equity to buy a brand new luxury SUV that Ryan was currently driving around town. Looking at those figures on paper made me feel like I was reading a police report of my own murder. Sarah hadn't just been sloppy. She had been methodical, treating my hard work overseas like a private gold mine to fund her lover's lifestyle, while I was risking my life in freezing temperatures. Arthur explained that because she had committed outright forgery on the second mortgage and siphoned marital assets into a non-relative's account, we had strong grounds for a financial fraud claim alongside a divorce filing. But he warned me that if I served her with divorce papers immediately, her family, who were wealthy, arrogant, and had always looked down on my middle-class background, would hire top lawyers to cover her tracks, stall the court, and paint me as a paranoid, abusive husband who abandoned his wife to work overseas. That was when the real plan took shape in my mind. Sarah's parents had spent the last 5 years treating me like I was never good enough for their precious daughter, constantly bragging at family dinners about how responsible and perfect Sarah was. My own parents, on the other hand, had given us $10,000 from their modest retirement fund 3 years ago to help us secure our home loan. Sarah had taken my parents' hard-earned savings and handed it to Ryan without a second thought. They all needed to see the truth, not through rumors or court papers, but directly with their own eyes in a setting where Sarah couldn't run away or pretend to be the victim. I spent the next 4 days living out of that quiet motel, staying completely off social media and turning my main phone onto airplane mode. I hired a local private investigator named Thomas, who spent 48 hours tailing Sarah and Ryan. Thomas delivered a massive digital file containing crisp, high-definition photos and videos. There were pictures of Ryan driving my SUV, video footage of them holding hands while shopping at high-end boutiques, and clear shots of them entering our house together late at night. Thomas even captured audio recordings of Ryan bragging to his friends at a local bar about how he had found a golden goose whose clueless husband was stuck working in Canada while paying for all his bills. With all the evidence sealed in physical folders and backed up on secure thumb drives, I initiated the first trap. I turned on my phone, put on my warmest, most loving voice, and called Sarah. I lied and told her that my flight had been delayed by a week due to bad weather, but that I would be arriving home late Saturday evening. She sounded completely unfazed, barely hiding her indifference, and quickly mentioned that she was busy with work. That was when I dropped the bait. I casually told her, since I'm coming home on Saturday, let's host a massive welcome back dinner at our house on Sunday afternoon. Invite your parents, your brother, and my parents. I want to celebrate our 5th anniversary properly with everyone. She hesitated for a second, clearly caught off guard, but the thought of showing off our house and playing the dutiful, loving wife in front of both families appealed to her ego. She agreed, promising to cook a huge meal and organize the whole gathering. Little did she know, she wasn't planning a happy family reunion. She was preparing the stage for her own public exposure. On Sunday morning, while Sarah was busy preparing the house and decorating the dining table for our anniversary feast, I was sitting in a coffee shop 2 blocks away, going over the final details with my attorney Arthur and my private investigator Thomas. We had compiled everything into 8 identical professional black leather folders, one for every single person invited to the dinner table. Inside each folder was a printed chronological breakdown of every wire transfer, certified bank statements showing the drained house fund, forged mortgage closing documents, high-resolution color photographs of Sarah and Ryan together, and a flash drive containing Ryan's recorded bar confession and full video clips. As I closed the briefcase containing those folders, my hands were completely steady, and every trace of grief had been replaced by a quiet, icy composure. I arrived at our house at 2 in the afternoon, pulling up in a rented sedan rather than taking a taxi, so my presence wouldn't draw early attention from the neighbors. When I unlocked the front door and walked into the foyer, Sarah came rushing out of the kitchen wearing a floral dress, wiping her hands on an apron, and putting on her signature wide, loving smile. She threw her arms around my neck, kissing my cheek, and whispered how much she had missed me over the last few grueling months. Standing in my own hallway, feeling her touch, the sheer hypocrisy of her action was so revolting that it physically made my jaw clench, but I forced a calm smile back, wrapped my arm around her waist, and thanked her for setting up the family gathering. Looking around the living room, I noticed she had strategically hidden my personal photos and rearranged the furniture, but the faint smell of Ryan's expensive cologne still lingered in the air like a stain. By 3 o'clock, the entire family had arrived. Sarah's parents, Richard and Eleanor, walked in with their usual arrogant posture, barely offering me a polite nod before sitting down on our leather couch and admiring the house. Sarah's younger brother, Ethan, sat in the armchair, endlessly scrolling through his phone with zero interest in being there. My own parents, middle-class people who had worked physical jobs their entire lives, arrived holding a small wrapped anniversary gift, their faces lighting up with genuine tears of pride as they hugged me tight and looked at the life they believed I had built. As we all gathered around the long dining table in the formal dining room, Sarah served a grand 3-course meal, pouring wine, laughing cheerfully, and repeatedly bringing up how hard I had been working overseas to secure our dream home. Every time she complimented my work ethic to her proud parents, my blood simmered, but I waited patiently for the exact right moment to pull the pin on the grenade. Dessert had just been served when Sarah's father raised his wine glass, clear-throated, and made a loud toast to our successful marriage and my bright future in industrial management. He smugly looked across the table at my father and said, "You see, hard work always pays off when a man has a sensible, devoted wife like Sarah keeping everything organized at home." That was my exact cue. I smiled warmly at my father-in-law, picked up my briefcase from beside my chair, and set it squarely on the center of the dining table, right between the candle holders and the dessert plates. The entire room fell silent as I unlatched the silver locks, the metallic click echoing loudly through the room. I looked around the table, making direct eye contact with every single person, before turning my gaze slowly towards Sarah, whose cheerful smile was beginning to waver into confusion. I spoke in a quiet, crystal-clear voice that carried across the quiet room. "Before we finish our drinks today, I want to give everyone here a special anniversary gift. Since you all think Sarah has been managing our home and finances so devotedly while I was away breaking my back in Canada, I brought a detailed report of where every single drop of my sweat went." I reached into the briefcase, pulled out 7 black folders, and began sliding them across the polished wooden table. One directly in front of Sarah's father, one to her mother, one to her brother, and one to each of my parents, leaving the last 2 open in front of Sarah and myself. The atmosphere in the room turned ice cold as everyone stared at the black folders sitting on the polished table. Sarah's mother, Eleanor, scoffed loudly, adjusting her pearl necklace and glaring at me with disgusted eyes. She snapped, "Marcus, what is the meaning of this dramatic nonsense? You come back early from Canada and start handing out legal files like we're in a courtroom? Have you completely lost your mind?" Her father, Richard, slammed his palm on the table, demanding I put the briefcase away and stop embarrassing my wife in front of her family. But my parents sat completely still, their faces pale, looking back and forth between me and the folder in front of them. My father was the first to open his folder, his calloused hands trembling slightly as he flipped past the cover page. I sat back in my chair, folded my hands calmly, and looked straight at Sarah. All the color had drained from her face, and her chest was heaving as she stared at the black folder in front of her as if it were a coiled snake ready to strike. I looked at her father and said in a measured, icy tone, "Open the file, Richard. Flip to page 3, where you'll see the certified bank records showing how $54,000 of my hard-earned savings were wired out of our joint account over the last 14 months. Sarah's mother opened her folder in a huff, intending to prove me wrong, but as her eyes scanned the top line, her smug expression instantly shattered. Page 3 contained a clear, chronological table of 9 separate wire transfers, complete with dates, exact dollar amounts, and the full legal name of the recipient, Ryan Miller. I watched Sarah's brother, Ethan, drop his phone, open his folder, and read the name out loud. Ryan Miller? Isn't that the guy Sarah used to date in college? The silence that followed his question was so deafening that you could hear the rain tapping against the window pane. My mother gasped, covering her mouth with both hands, while my father slowly turned to page 5, where the color photographs were printed in high resolution. There, spread across 2 full pages, were crystal-clear images of Sarah and Ryan together over the past 6 months. Pictures of them holding hands outside expensive boutique stores, kissing in the parking lot of a luxury resort while I was working 16-hour shifts in 30-below temperatures, and Ryan driving the luxury SUV through town. Sarah suddenly scrambled across her chair, grabbing at her parents' folders, screaming hysterically, "Stop looking at those! He's lying. He fabricated these photos. He's trying to frame me because he doesn't want to give me a divorce." But as she reached for her father's folder, he pushed her hand away, his eyes wide with absolute horror as he looked at a copy of the second mortgage agreement bearing my forged electronic signature. My father stood up from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. He didn't yell or throw a fit. He looked at Sarah with a look of pure, unadulterated disgust that cut deeper than any insult. He looked at her father and said, "We gave you $10,000 of our retirement money 3 years ago to help you 2 buy a house. My son broke his back in Canada sending every penny home, and your daughter was using that money to buy luxury cars for her ex-boyfriend." Sarah's mother began to cry, covering her face in shame, while her father sat frozen in his seat, completely unable to defend his daughter for the first time in his life. The silence in the room was suffocating. Sarah stood frozen, her eyes darting between the photos on the table and her father's stoic, ashamed face. Seeing that her usual crying and denial weren't working, she dropped to her knees right beside my chair, reaching out to grab my hand with tear-filled eyes. She sobbed, "Marcus, please listen to me. It's not what you think. Ryan manipulated me. He threatened to leak old photos if I didn't give him money. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I only love you, Marcus. Please don't do this to our family." I slowly pulled my hand away from her grip, looking down at her with complete detachment. "You weren't scared when you signed my name on a second mortgage, Sarah," I said softly. "You weren't scared when you were sipping champagne with him at a luxury resort while I was working double shifts in 30-below weather. And you certainly weren't scared when you let him sleep in my bed in the house my blood and sweat built." I reached into my briefcase one last time and pulled out 2 final legal envelopes. I placed the first envelope in front of Sarah. It was a formal divorce petition along with a criminal fraud complaint for forging my electronic signature on bank and mortgage documents. I then looked at her father, Richard, and placed the second envelope in front of him. Inside was a formal legal notice demanding the immediate return of the $10,000 my parents had loaned us, along with an freeze order on our joint accounts to recover the $54,000 siphoned to Ryan. By tomorrow morning, Arthur will have served Ryan with a civil lawsuit for asset siphoning and organized fraud, I announced, standing up from the table. "And as for this house, the locks will be changed by 9 a.m. tomorrow. You have until midnight to pack your clothes and get out." Sarah's mother tried to speak, her voice trembling as she asked where Sarah was supposed to go. But my mother stood up, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "She can go live with the man she spent my son's blood money on." My parents and I picked up our coats, walked past Sarah's sobbing form on the dining room floor, and walked out the front door into the cool night air. For 5 years, I had carried the heavy burden of cold weather, physical exhaustion, and loneliness across oceans. But as I opened the car door for my parents and drove away from that house, the weight on my shoulders completely vanished. Sarah thought she had tricked me into funding her fake life, but in the end, she lost her marriage, her reputation, her family's pride, and her financial freedom, all in a single afternoon.